For 12 long years, the Xbox One was considered the impenetrable fortress of modern gaming, completely unhackable, but today, the fortress has fallen. And our hero, Marcus Doom Gassederen, just dropped the Bliss exploit at Reverse 2026, cracking the 2013 Xbox One wide open, and this might be one of the most significant Xbox exploits since the original RGH days. So let's dive into how this works and why you should definitely care about this. Real quick, if you're new here, hey, I'm Coulter, and on this channel we cover console modding, retro handhelds, weird PC builds, and general janky tech stuff. If that sounds like you, be sure to subscribe down below so you can catch future videos. Now, for over a decade, console modders like us have longed for bare metal access to the Xbox One. Sandbox dev mode was nice, if you know you know, but it wasn't quite enough. Modders like me, and likely you if you're watching this channel, prefer to have unrestricted, unencumbered control of the hardware so we can do weird stuff to it, like install Linux or RetroArch, and we'll get to the possibilities of what this exploit opens up for the Xbox One later in the video. But we want this unrestricted access because it allows us modders to do what we want to do with the console, because that's just what we do. And that's why the ladies can't get enough of us. And so that's why today we are diving into how this unhackable Xbox One finally got hacked, what exactly you need to mod your own system, and why this could literally save the 8th generation of gaming. Quick bit of backstory, the Xbox 360, you might have heard of it, and you also might be aware that it's exploitable. Not just with the recent bad update exploit that lets you use a purely software-based way to run custom code in the 360. Check out my previous videos on those if you missed those. But even way back in the 360's lifecycle, the JTAG and RGH exploit methods, which required a little bit of soldering, maybe a mod chip here or there, but bottom line, it was very possible to run unsigned code on the 360 fairly early in its life cycle, and obviously Microsoft didn't love that because they make their money mostly on the back end of consoles on licensed game sales and all of that, and they don't want anything hurting that profit margin. So, learning from their mistakes with the 360, on the Xbox One, they ripped out the reset pin, locked down the timings, and made the boot ROM mathematically perfect, where it was declared to have 0 software bugs, and Tony Chen in a 2019 security talk even said that a software exploit was impossible. The only way to exploit this thing was a hardware attack. And so, guess what our new friend Marcus did? He hit it with a hardware attack. So the way the Bliss exploit works is it relies on a voltage glitch that targets the Northbridge rail on the chip. By momentarily shorting the processor's power supply to ground for a teeny tiny microsecond, during the boot sequence, it causes the CPU to drop its voltage for a second and actually skip the RSA signature check within the bootloader. And the translation of all that nerd speak, while the Xbox One is booting up, we create a tiny little moment where we're able to run any unsigned code we want. And if that process sounds familiar, it's actually quite similar to how Nintendo Switch mod chips work, where it's just trying to play with the voltages and create a little moment to slip in some unsigned code. It's kind of a common practice, but it's very hard to find those voltages and those timings, so big shout out to Marcus for figuring this out. And the wild thing is that because that little moment happens before Microsoft's irreversible cryptographic stuff happens, since we can slip the code in at that point, it assumes it's properly signed and grants it full supervisor execution, which translating from nerdspeak means that we can do whatever the heck we want with the system. Now, if you want to implement this mod today on your Xbox One, there are a few caveats which we'll get into right now. The first being that it has to be a VCR Xbox One, the original launch model. The Xbox One S and X, maybe, but those are still pending some further investigation, and this exploit might need to morph a bit for those consoles. They appear to be a little more beefed up on security. So requirement 1 is it has to be an original VCR Xbox One. Real quick before we move on, big shout out to this video sponsor, JustWay. If you need any 3D printing or CNC work, prototyping something cool, or building something for your house, whatever it is, you can check out JustWay. They're fast, precise, and super easy to work with. They even offer other services like CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, and injection molding. Whether you've got an idea for a brand new product or just a specific part you need made, JustWay can bring it to life. So check out the link in the description for more, and thank you so much JustWay for sponsoring this video. The high level of the actual modification process is getting either like a Pico or a Teensy and getting a little program set up on those to act as a glitch board, again similar to a PicoFly mod chip for a Switch. So you get your glitch board, you set up a basic MOSFET on the Northbridge, which yes, I had to look up what a MOSFET is, and it's apparently a metal oxide semiconductor field effect transmitter. Translation is it's a fancy transistor used for switching or amplifying signals on in this case, the Northbridge chip on the Xbox One. And the last part of this exploit, which is the really janky part, is that you actually have to remove some tiny capacitors from the underside of the Xbox One logic board to ensure that the voltage drops cleanly for this to work, which is definitely not an operation for the faint of heart. If you're way better than me at soldering and actually took all of that on, then the boot times for this exploit are expected to be between 30 seconds and 30 minutes. But over time with community refinement, I'm sure that boot time will come down, just like what happened with the bad update exploit, which went from like half an hour down to just a few seconds, which was sick. So at this point, I'm sure you're thinking, Coulter, why are we talking about this Xbox One exploit if it's not actually that doable for the average tinkerer to do with a basic soldering station at home? This sounds like more of a research discovery than an actual practical discovery, and you'd be right, actually. In its current state, this has been published more as a research discovery, but as history tells us, I wouldn't be surprised if over the next year or two, this exploit process gets refined a bit as people find other points or voltages or ways to simplify the process. And once that happens, then we might be so lucky to be able just to order an Xbox One glitch chip off of AliExpress and solder it to the well-documented 5 points on the board, similar to an OG RGH mod, and then boot into some homebrew written for the bare metal Xbox One. So to reiterate, that's gonna take some time, but I think this is a pretty major step toward the future of the Xbox One homebrew scene, which leads me to why we should care about the Xbox One being fully exploitable. And a really big one is game preservation. Right now, there are a lot of Xbox One titles that were only ever made for the Xbox One. They didn't even get like a remaster re-release for the Series S or X, and when the new Project Helix comes out later, who knows where that Xbox One title will live, meaning that 8th generation game might be stuck on 8th generation hardware. And without this exploit, there'd be no way to dump a backup of that game for game preservation reasons, which is becoming ever more important, as seen with things like the Stop Killing Games initiative. Another huge reason this is important is bare metal apps and emulation. But dev mode traps you in a UWP app container with only 2 to 4 gigs of RAM available, whereas the Bliss exploit would unlock the full 8 gigs of DDR3 RAM in the Xbox One and the highly critical 32 megs of ES RAM. On top of that, JIT, or just-in-time compilation, would be unlocked, so that emulators like Dolphin could push Wii and GameCube titles at a locked 60 FPS 1080p, which would be a massive upgrade from the current Xbox One emulation performance. Plus, having access to all 8 AMD Jaguar cores would be a big boon for PCXX2 emulation as well. And the third reason this exploit is awesome is for just wild, janky projects like I like to do on this channel. And especially given that the Xbox One is an x86 based platform, that means that with a full exploit, it's pretty feasible we'd be able to get Linux running on this thing, like we recently did on the PS4. Check out the video if you missed it. And with Linux running on it, that means we can get Steam running on it and turn it into, drumroll please, a Steam machine. And I'm sure Gabe Newell is very scared already. And finally, a bonus benefit is also just hardware preservation. Like if you're able to exploit the console, if you're someone like me who has 2 broken Xbox Ones, a dead console with a working disk drive, and a working console with a dead disk drive, you'd be able to unpair those disk drives and then create a fully working system again, instead of things sequentially dying off and becoming e-waste. I'm sure there's a lot left to unfold in the Xbox One exploit journey that just kicked off in these last couple weeks, so if you want to see more coverage on the Xbox One as these exploits evolve, then definitely be sure to comment down below and let me know you want to see that kind of video. So, are you going to be exploiting your Xbox One when the more streamlined glitch chips eventually show up? If so, go ahead and drop a fire emoji in the comments. Or if you think the Xbox One is just dead and should fade away into the ether, then go ahead and drop a skull emoji in the comments so I know that you just don't care about this kind of coverage. Huge shout out to the Patreon supporters in advance for funding the Xbox One logic boards I'll likely kill while trying to get one of them exploited. And if you haven't already, be sure to join the Discord so you can connect with the growing community we're working on here. And finally, if you like this video, you'll probably enjoy it when I upgraded the Switch Lite so much that I was able to run Breath of the Wild at 60 FPS, which was a wild ride. But thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.